So, welcome everybody to the seminar today. Today's speaker is Deeptarko Das, who is very well known for his work on quantum quenches with and without holography. And he's going to present his new results on this field. And it's very nice to have him, especially because we had an overlap in HRI at that time when he was doing his master's thesis. And then he we tried to get him in Chennai unsuccessfully so far. So, but here he is today giving his talk. So over to you, Deeptarko.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Actually, it's great to have this opportunity to present to this audience. And I had actually wished that even in April I could have been there, but unfortunately we are all still this entire year we are in this situation. But anyway, I hope I can convey this talk to you in a coherent manner. And please ask questions. This is not very recent work. This is almost 8, 9, 9, 10 months old work. But I thought I will present this to this audience because I then recently started thinking about many of the issues which you will see are to be still worked out. Okay, and this is a work with my student Vidyut, who is here in IIT Kanpur. And this is the reference. And as the title suggests, it will involve quantum quench. It will not really involve holography. It will just be quantum quench in field theory. And the phenomena that we will focus on will be actually will have to do with restoration of symmetry. And in fact, it will be also tied with ideas of thermalization. So because whenever we are quenching a quantum system, we are taking it out of equilibrium. And then one natural question is what is happening, what is a good description of the system out of equilibrium? So let me begin with that motivation. So the main motivation is to understand non-equilibrium dynamics of quantum field theories. And this work just fits into this broad motivation. And because we are mostly used to equilibrium quantum field theories where we usually calculate transition amplitudes of this kind, where we have an asymptotic vacuum and at late time T is very large. Late time we also end up with a vacuum, and then interaction picture works very nicely, and then we calculate amplitudes, and we are always limited to ground state. We always explore the ground state, but that is highly successful. It has led to a lot of nice results. Also, other important scenario, which is also in equilibrium, is finite temperatures, where we calculate correlators with the density, with the thermal density matrix. And this is also very highly successful, and it matches very well with what we observe. Okay, most of the things, even though everything around us is out of equilibrium, most of the things seem to be thermalized to some temperature. Okay, because most of the things are out of equilibrium, the broad goal is to understand non-equilibrium dynamics. In particular, we want to understand how the quantum systems thermalize.
So Deeptarko, here you will be focusing more on isolated systems or systems coupled to a bath?
Yeah, thanks. So here actually I will focus on isolated systems, and it will start from its ground state, and I will take it out of equilibrium by quenching the system.
Yes, but then isolated systems do not really thermalize. I mean, it would be thermalization in some sense, yes. Right? I mean, yeah.
So very good. So yeah. So I would be maybe let me put it in quotes, because what I mean by thermalize for isolated systems is in the sense of the eigenstate thermalization hypothesis. Is if I look at local operator expectation values, where this is my state which is out of equilibrium, but a pure state. If the operator is sufficiently local, which means it has support only on a finite subregion, then under some certain circumstances, this observable is well approximated by thermal expectation value. Okay, so in this sense, I mean, in this sense, I am using the word thermalize. So if I look at some observable, in fact, here we will also look at a local observable, and we will try to reinterpret it as a thermal expectation value. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. But many other researchers have used different notions. For example, in ON models, there were simulations using field theory, using these 2PI effective techniques, and then they simply looked into the evolution, the Schwinger-Dyson equations, and found that the fluctuation dissipation relation emerges with some temperature at the 2-point functions.
Yeah.
So I mean, there are probably many other also, but this is sort of a little bit more non-local in the sense of, I guess, it's yeah.
It's a 2-point function. But it's still in a finite regime. If one waits for a very long time, I will expect, because operators will grow, so it will start to see a lot of the system, and then the reduced density matrix may not look a thermal reduced density matrix. So yeah, there are various notions, but for now I will just look at some local field.
Okay. So you're trying to test how the eigenstate thermalization actually emerges in a way.
So yeah. So out of equilibrium, one expects this kind of a relationship to approximately. So another thing which is of interest, and which will be, so this question will be partially answered in this talk in one example. Another thing which will be a focus of this talk is what is the fate of symmetries when we take the system out of equilibrium. So for example, if there is a quantum field theory which exhibits, say, spontaneous symmetry breaking, that's property of the ground state. But when I take the system out of equilibrium, I excite the states. And different states may have different characterizations under symmetries. So generically, what can we say about symmetries? So how much of it is preserved, what is broken, what happens to symmetries, and how is this notion, again, it's again put in quotes, and how are the symmetries related to thermalization?
So just naively speaking, you would expect that symmetries would be always restored if there is thermalization, because the Noether charge will commute with the Hamiltonian.
Exactly. So exactly. So basically, you will expect that if the system, one signature of thermalization would be that the symmetry is getting restored. Okay, and this is actually this is tied to lot of interesting phenomena, like even there's this paper from '77 by Polyakov where he showed that the quarks get liberated at some finite temperature. So when different symmetries in different quantum field theories can show different interesting restoration and breaking patterns. And the main goal, actually, one of the important goals is not to understand if the symmetry is restored or anything, but to understand, are there any universalities in the non-equilibrium dynamics? And by dynamics now, I mean either thermalization or dynamically what is happening to symmetries. Both of these things are happening dynamically. So for example, if you look at this quantity, this right hand side is independent of time. This quantity initially will depend on time, and generically what happens is this starts fluctuating, and then it usually it settles down to the thermal expectation value. So this kind of thermalization is also happening dynamically. There is some scale. There is some scale where which the system takes to thermalize. Okay, similarly, here also there will be some scale. And the question that we want to ask and to understand is, are there any universalities in these dynamics? Okay, and it's also important from holographic point of view, though I will not spend much time, maybe towards the end a little bit. Because from holography, taking a system out of equilibrium and thermalization, these are associated with dynamics of black holes. Okay, and there are various interesting results, scalings for black hole formation, and now there is a lot of interest in, again, renewed interest in understanding black hole evaporation and, for example, information loss paradox. So it's very essential to understand the dynamics. Okay, and by dynamics here, we will focus on out of equilibrium dynamics. Okay, so this is still linger on with more motivations. So these universalities, let's go a little bit deeper into the universalities. So what are known? So for example, there's so the way we will take the thing out of equilibrium will be by a quantum quench, which basically means making the Hamiltonian a function of time. So there's some coupling which is a function of time, and this may be a relevant or a irrelevant operator if this is at a fixed point. Okay, and there is some scale associated with this change. So for example, you can think of this. So what we will focus on in this talk will be smooth changes of lambda. So when lambda is a function of time, smoothly changes asymptotes between two values. And the main change happens in a regime which is set by delta t. So delta t is delta t inverse is like the mass scale of this change. And if the coupling is tuned across a critical point, suppose this is lambda critical, then what happens is adiabaticity breaks down because the system becomes gapless. So the system gets excited arbitrarily. Energy levels cross. You're definitely no longer in the low energy subspace. And this breakdown of adiabaticity, actually it's not necessarily that the coupling has to be tuned to the critical point. It can be close to the critical point, and adiabaticity may still break down. So the breakdown of adiabaticity can start happening. So the first occurrence of breakdown of adiabaticity can happen in this yellow region. So somewhere, say here. And the scale where it happens is defined to be the Keeble-Zurek scale. So this, if we solve for the breakdown of adiabaticity, we'll get a scale. That's called the Keeble-Zurek. KZ stands for Keeble and Zurek. I apologize, I will not give the references here, but at the very end, I will list down some partial list of references.
Deeptarko, so what exactly is the scale? You mean is it this? Is it how close you are to the lambda c, or
Yeah.
what determines the scale?
Yeah, the scale is determined if I do adiabatic perturbation theory, time-dependent adiabatic perturbation theory, then the correction to the dynamic gap is given by basically 1 by delta t d delta dt. This is the leading order correction in adiabatic perturbation theory. And the scale is determined by when the leading order answer is of the same order as this correction. You solve this equation for a t. So generally, if we are near the critical point, delta t will go like t minus, it will go like lambda which is a function of t minus lambda c to the power some critical exponent, right? And you plug this in this equation, you solve for a t, a scale. That's when adiabaticity starts to break down. And what happens is if I measure any observable, any 1-point function, 2-point function observable after adiabaticity has broken down, if I look at expectation values of say O tilde delta prime, these are all dictated by this time scale. Okay, it's sort of the system freezes at that time scale, and this works. There is no field theoretic understanding why this works, but this is popularly called the diabatic approximation.
Sorry, I didn't quite get what is it that you wrote here? That expectation value of what?
Expectation value of some operator, some other operator, is dictated by this scale, the Kibble-Zurek scale. So all correlation functions will be dictated by that scale.
And this is something that you, in your earlier work, you were able to show holographically, if I remember, or something.
There is some way to see this, but directly from field theory, there
is no way to see this.
And also, our reason is because in field theory, this has been derived only in free field theories. And
sorry. And also one very nice question. So you're assuming that this operator is going to 0 after the quench, or I don't?
No. You can calculate it exactly in exactly solvable models, and you discover this kind of a scale.
No, I understand, but I mean, this scaling is. I mean, this is assuming that the operate expectation value goes to 0 after thermal after the quench is over. Or
no, this is not. This is just the exact solution. So
exact solution within the quench period, or
within the quench period. Say suppose somewhere here. It doesn't matter where exactly, here, or either at T1 or T2 I measure.
Okay, but this seems to be decaying in time. If delta prime is greater than 0, it seems to be decaying in time. So that's why I'm asking about.
Right. So in this case, it actually depends on the. So usually it will. So this is not behavior in time. First of all, this is a fixed time observable. So this is a function. It will be a function of the rate of the quench. So T Kibble-Zurek is an emergent length scale. So it is, and it depends on how fast or slow you are doing the quench. And this decay, or if there is a decay, then it will depend on whether you are doing it very fast or whether you are doing it very slow.
And so yeah, this is why I got confused, because there's a t dependence on the left hand side and there is no t. Okay, now you say there's no t dependence on
the fixed time.
There's a fixed time, but delta prime depends on t.
No, delta prime is the operator dimension.
Yeah, but that should be function of lambda, no?
So if you wish, there is a function which is T1 over delta t. But what I just want to point out is that there is a universal scaling which is dictated by the length scale, where adiabaticity has broken.
And delta prime is a dimension at the critical point, probably.
Delta prime is the dimension at the critical point in this case.
Okay, all right.
So
Deeptarko?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So you said this this behavior, this diabetic approximation, this has not been derived, so to speak, right, from field theory? Is this some observation that, okay, it has to go like T Kibble-Surek to the minus delta prime for scaling reasons?
I will show you, it's very case specific. So
Okay.
in free field theory, you can actually argue for this. In free field theory, and that has been done in a lot of series of works by Sumit Das, Damian Galante, Rob Myers, from 2014 to 2017.
And how much is known about this function f?
Function f also, you don't know any universal properties, but you
Also
know,
case specific.
yeah, it's also case specific.
Okay.
But here my goal is very simple. I just want to understand how this appears in other generic theories, where there is an interesting symmetry that can be broken or restored.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
And of course, there is another very well-known universality which arises, even so, this Kibble-Surek, which is in sudden quench. So usually all these, whenever you break adiabaticity, then observables, there are still some universalities. Usually we associate universalities with equilibrium, but even here there are some universalities. For example, sudden quench, say if you in particular, if you quench parameter to critical system, then if you look at the entanglement entropy, then you will see that it grows linearly for 1 plus 1d, 1 plus 1d theories.
This can be understood in conformal field theories, but it is true for generic even if it is not conformal. This linear growth.
This linear growth, no, I don't know if it is. I don't know if people have seen this in other generic theories. So I'm just talking about CFTs. So
I
when
see.
went to a CFT, say
Yeah, and could you tell me something, because I read this Cardy-Calabrese paper and all, and also the Hongliu papers. So for 1 plus 1d, what is this this so-called tsunami velocity? Is it what determines this this slope?
Remember, so large C. So this will in general this comes from a calculation of a 2-point function in a boundary state of a CFT. So that gets mapped to a 4-point function. So it will depend on your entire spectrum.
Yeah, the Cardy calculation assume that this boundary state flows to some special state which preserves the conformal, I mean, on a BCFT operator, this boundary. So and then there is some small epsilon there, and that determines the slope. But you see this slope anyway in generically in any calculation. So I was thinking if there's a better understanding now of the slope.
The slope will also depend on, I think, on the spectrum. Not just epsilon, not just the regularization parameter, but also if you maybe at large C, the vacuum block answer there is it's just dictated by epsilon, but in general it will be sensitive to the full operator.
So so I would be happy if you could send me, give us some references later, maybe on about this. About this sudden quenches entanglement beyond Cardy-Calabrese, what is known now. And
so sure. So this is the CFT, and there is a nice holographic picture also due to Mollesen and Hartmann with the end of the world brain. So, but I just want to point out that there is a universality here, and an important thing to keep in mind is that. In the Kibble-Surek scaling happens when the energy scale associated with the quench is less than the initial energy gap. So if the initial energy gap is, say, the mass of the mass scale of the theory, m0, then delta T inverse is less than m0, which is obviously less than the cutoff. And for the sudden, delta T inverse is actually infinite because it's happening suddenly, so it's much larger than even the cutoff. So it's not that practical of a quench scenario, but there is also another regime which is where delta T inverse is greater than m0 but less than lambda. And here also there are universalities. This is called the fast scaling regime. This was discovered first in holography by Alex Bushell and Rob Myers, and then also. And this is basically dictated by, one can actually understand this using conformal perturbation theory. Because you are so fast that there are no scales that you can see except the cutoff. Okay, and so because there was this question about how to understand this, let me illustrate this with an example. But this few lines are just to tell you that there are some universalities associated with quenches with out of equilibrium. Okay, and primarily we will actually in this talk I will focus on this Kibble-Zurek kind of scaling. Okay, any questions?
So you are going to study both the fast and this both kind of quenches, and now
no, just this kind of.
So this is fast or
no? This is fast. This is in this regime. This is.
okay.
This,
so it's not that fast, okay.
Not that fast, but still.
Okay.
To it still breaks down. Adiabaticity still gets broken.
Yes.
So example. So just to example, the free scalar field theory. Sorry. Excuse me. Where this is just del phi square minus m square phi square, and we make m as a function of time. Okay. So the way we will solve this problem, so we will have to, if we are doing a quantum field theory, so we write down the second quantized expression uk sum mode ak plus uk star t ak dagger, where these are the positive energy ingoing modes. And but now we have made m as a function of time. So suppose m has a profile, starts from some m naught, and goes smoothly to some other function of m. And we will decrease m because we want to be near the m equal to 0 where the theory becomes gapless. And what we will measure is the phi square of it at say time t equal to 0. And this is a time dependent scenario. So the only observables that make sense are in vacuum. So expectation is calculated in the initial state because we don't know what the final state is. More on this later. So one method that we will use to calculate these quantities will be the Schwinger-Keldysh, but not here. Here we will exactly solve it. So usually we will solve it using Schwinger-Keldysh contours. We will come back to this. Okay, so the way this is, one can solve this is by making an ansatz for uk of t. So uk of t. We know that at the limit t going to minus infinity, when mass is m naught, uk of t should be 1 over square root 2 omega naught k e power minus I omega naught kt minus k dot x, where omega naught is square root k square plus m naught square. So this we know, this we want from the solution. And motivated by this boundary condition, we make the answers to some omega k, some function of t, e power ik dot x minus integral omega k t prime dt prime. Lower limit doesn't matter. And then we plug this into the Klein-Gordon equation with the time-dependent mass. And we find, we'll find what we'll find is we'll find a differential equation for this omega, capital omega. We'll find omega k square is omega k square minus half omega k double dot by omega k plus 3 by 4 omega k dot omega k square. Okay, and then what you can do is you can solve this using the derivative expansion, which is you assume that m of t is greater than m dot of t greater than m double dot of t. So it's a smooth change. And then you can find out what is omega as a function of this m of t. Plug this into your solution, and this will be just integral over dd minus 1 k omega naught 1 over omega k of t. And here you will see indeed that there will be these scalings. In particular, what you will see is that, say, if you take a function which near this point goes linearly, so m goes linearly, then you will find that the scaling phi square scales like delta t to the power 1 minus d by 2. Right, it's related to the conformal dimension of the free field. And there is some scaling, half scaling coming from basically the Kibble-Zurek, the way Kibble-Zurek is related to delta t in this example. Okay, so this is one example where you can calculate this explicitly and see this. But this is free field theory, so of course you will like to do it for interactive theories. Okay, but any questions about this?
So here you can actually find the final state, which will not be a thermal state at all by Bogoliubov transformations. No?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Here you will see that it will be some thermal like state. There will be particle production, and
so it should not be a thermal state, I guess. I mean, it would be some kind of what is it? Yeah, you can find it by Bogoliubov transformation.
So it will look like a squeeze state.
It will look like a squeeze state, exactly, with a daggers, yeah, two correlated pairs.
This is the Hamiltonian, so it will look like a thermal state. It will look
there'll be two a daggers. There will be correlated pairs, but correlated pairs cannot happen in thermal equilibrium.
Yeah.
So here, of course, in a free field theory, you won't expect thermalization as well.
Yeah, but no. Actually, what happens is for every mode k, there you can associate a temperature. So, and the temperature depends on the momentum. So for every mode k,
simply because you have a dagger a, you simply have some number. You have some expected number. Yeah, that in that way you can, but in no way it is actually because you have pairs of like with k and minus k which are correlated. I don't think you will be any observable any 2-point function at least cannot match a thermal behavior anyway in this.
You know, so yeah, because there are all these numbers, nk, these are all conserved quantities. The population at every momentum mode is a conserved quantity.
Hmm.
So it will be in some grand generalized ensemble you can think of.
Hmm.
And this is also another question: is that if the system is integrable, then you expect it to go to some generalized Gibbs ensemble.
So you can then use some generalized hydrodynamics or some
Yeah.
sort of this picture, then I guess.
Yes, so there are some studies like this by Benjamin Doyon, who
Hmm.
works with Cardi. So there are some results where, but there he's starting with a thermostat and he's changing temperature as function of time and measuring transport quantities and understanding them using some GGE description.
Nice. But your main point is that the scaling you can understand simply from like free quasi-particle like picture.
Yeah, exactly.
I see. Okay.
Just need to solve this kind of equation. So of course there are other motivations. So for example, recently there are some indications that thermal, especially in context of gravity, the thermal behavior emerges upon doing some kind of ensemble average. And this is again within quotes because there are many ways of doing average over theories, different theories. For example, in large CCFTs, there is a parameter which is directly related to the central charge, and people average over that and get some kind of a thermal behavior. And this quenching, where you make lambda time dependent, one can also think of as doing averaging because you are exploring different theories by varying the coupling within some subset. Of course, so it will be really interesting to see if some gravity, not holography, but some gravity-like emerges in gravitational theories. I should say gravity theories. If by quenching, if there is some contact with some gravitational theory, so this is some really vague kind of motivation.
So haven't such simulations been done for SYK?
For SYK, yeah, SYK we know it is already a gravity theory. So yeah.
Is it? I mean, it's sort of like, but it's not. We don't know the exact gravity dual, perhaps. But...
no, but there is a paper by Bargetts, Altland, and Kamenev, which actually relates the late time SYK dynamics, means if under non-equilibrium, to Liouville quantum mechanics.
Yeah, but that map can be done, I guess. I think even Verlinde pointed out there is a map like that.
Yeah.
Based on simply the time reparametrization mode, but
yeah.
Yeah,
by gravity I will. So yeah, you can. Of course, that means again this is I should again put this in quotes, but yeah, Liouville quantum mechanics I will treat like is like a theory of gravity.
Yeah. But what I was asking if thermalization or like some kind of ETH like behavior have been already understood for SYK.
Yeah, ETH like behavior has been understood. Yes. ETH like behavior, and also it is important that because the way ETH works, the ensemble average is exchanged for time average. And basically it means absolutely you're right that means in SYK this has been demonstrated in a very SYK there is anyway this disorder average, and one actually can verify explicitly that you look at explicitly the off diagonal matrix elements of operators, simple operators, and you see there is this exponential decay.
But Diptarko, you must know this, no? That there are these so-called pure systems, these pure SYK states which do not thermalize. These kind of states have been constructed also by Maldacena and yeah. So there are the special states which whether even the 2-point functions never thermalize and all this. So what I was going to ask is, so the question is, what leads to this thermalization? Has this been understood? I mean, it's not about that you have the ETH will work. It's about how do you actually, the mechanism through which you get, you attain this ETH. Has that been kind of more understood? Like what kind of states can thermalize, what can't?
Yeah, so states where means energy eigenstates where operator expectation values behave this way, we'll have associated temperature. So that is the criteria, and that is how. So so basically for each of these state, I can associate a temperature. There will be beta B, and for this there will be some beta A. That is built into the way this criteria is derived. So you start by demanding that expectation value approximates a thermal expectation value, and then you try to ask what do you need for this to be true, and this criteria comes up.
Okay, I think I was asking a little bit different question. So, this what you expect is a typical state would have this characteristics, right? This is that. So when you are doing this ensemble averaging, so what I was trying to ask is actually this in this context that we know that there are certain states which do not manage to thermalize. For example, this pure spin systems where you can take like all spins in the up direction. You can map this SYKs to spin half systems, as you know.
Yeah.
And if you can map this, and then there are these states which are like where this pure states, like you have spin ups, or some of them are spin downs and others are up. And so these kind of states are very special, that they don't seem to thermalize. And
so those states will not satisfy this kind of
those states won't satisfy this even after disorder averaging, or even after the what even. So okay, so the question I'm getting confused is it a is this a question about sorry? So is this a question about where dynamics is involved, or simply a kinematic?
No, this is simply a question about a given theory. So
no. I mean, is it a question about dynamics, or is it a question about? So what kind of dynamical information appears here in this statement, where the dynamics comes in?
Yeah, dynamics is coming because these are off-diagonal elements. So any dynamics means will be sensitive to off-diagonal matrix elements, because all the time dependence comes from off-diagonal matrix elements.
Yes, but when you're taking an ensemble of theories, these eigenstates are also are not definite objects, no?
Yeah. So for ensemble, yeah, exactly. Okay. So for ensemble, there is no criteria like this. This is for a given theory.
Yes. So SYK is an example of an ensemble.
Yeah.
Because you have to do disorder averaging.
Yeah, you have to do disorder averaging. Then these are not pure energy eigenstate of a given theory anymore.
Yeah. So in this context, it's a little bit surprising that this pure state, at least in the large n limit, you could show that they don't thermalize. This is what I was asking, like how to understand that.
Yeah, I don't know about this at all. But if someone can map those states into some ground state of some other Hamiltonian, then maybe one can understand.
Okay. Anyway.
Okay. So let me now start my talk. Okay, so I will start by, so maybe I will use my slides, otherwise I will not finish in time. Okay, so this is the outline. So I will talk about one model where we will explore these features. This is a Gross-Neveu model from 70s. And we'll see that it actually has, it is exactly solvable in large N. So where N will be the number of fermion flavors. And the order parameter that we will look at will be the symmetry order parameter, which will come from the generalization of gap equation. And we will look, we'll see, so what we'll find is that due to the quench, so this theory, the equilibrium properties of this theory will be that it actually spontaneously breaks a discrete symmetry. And we'll see that due to the quench, that symmetry will get restored. And with this dynamic, so it will happen in time. There will be some time where the symmetry will get restored. And that time we can associate with we'll show that that time can be understood as a Kibble-Zurek scaling. And we will see that there is some scaling regime of this theory where Liouville-like description exists. So again, I'm limiting myself to, again, another case study, but this is hopefully a little more interesting case study than free field theories, because this theory is interesting and has a lot of interesting features close to, say, QCT, or what means close to other theories which have similar features. So for example, this is the theory. So there are, there's a theory in two space-time dimensions. There are n flavors of these fermions. Okay, and in two space-time dimensions, these are the Dirac matrices. And you will see that this theory has possesses this chiral symmetry. Okay, so in 2 dimensions, there are only 2 Dirac matrices, and this is the theory is symmetric under this. So a useful way to solve this theory whenever there is a quartic interaction is to do a Hubbard-Stratanovich transformation. Just insert one with a composite field sigma. So if you do that, this is the theory that you get. So if you now integrate out sigma, you go back to your original theory. And the symmetry now gets realized as sigma going to minus sigma. Okay, so it becomes a Z2. It has a Z2 action on sigma. And now in large N, so before going to large N, first of all, what you can do now is this theory is now quadratic in the fermions. So you can integrate over the fermions. If you do that, then you get this effective theory. You can think of this as the effective potential of the sigma field. This factor of minus comes because there are the loops are fermionic, and there's an n because there are n flavors. So there are these indices. There's a trace over the flavor indices which gives this n. Okay, and this is just the fermionic this is the determinant which appears when integrating the fermions, and I've just used determinant as e power trace log and written this expression. And now when n is large, I can do a saddle point approximation, and the saddle point approximation will give me this equation. Okay, and you can solve this equation, and you will see that sigma, so there are many features of this theory. One is there is dimensional transmutation. So sigma has mass dimension 1, and the cutoff makes up that dimension explicitly. It is asymptotically free, and it spontaneously breaks symmetry because this is non-zero. So sigma equal to 0 will be because you see when sigma is non-zero, then this term is present, and this term explicitly breaks this Z2 symmetry, because only sigma equal to 0 is the fixed point of this action. So dynamically, when you integrate out all the fermions in the theory, it develops a expectation value. The condensate develops an expectation value. It spontaneously breaks the symmetry. And if you calculate the beta function, you will see it is negative. Okay? So it has many nice features of being an interesting theory. Okay, and what is also known, also another equilibrium calculation. So this is how the effective potential looks like. These are those non-zero values of sigma and minus sigma. So as usual, these values of sigma are related by the Z2, where the symmetry is broken. So the theory picks up these either one of these vector. And then if you study this theory at finite temperature, you will see that this effective potential actually rises, and this becomes symmetric. So again, sigma equal to 0 becomes the minimum, and symmetry gets restored. Okay, so any question about these properties of this theory? Okay, if not, so let's now do the quench. Okay, so the way what we will do is we will make this G a function of time. Okay, G will make a function of time. So in the original model, this G will become a function of time. So in the original theory, we calculated when we smoothly quench. So we will smoothly quench G. That is, we will make G a function of time. So again, think of this going from one G to another G as a function of time. G initial to G final. And usually all these equilibrium calculations, if we start from the ground state, if we do the zero temperature calculation, we always calculate this. This is the partition function, which is this amplitude. But now when H becomes a function of time, then even if we start with 0, we will end up with some final state, which we don't know. But this is still a unitary evolution with this with a time-dependent Hamiltonian. So we can write f as still u on 0. So then we use this definition back, and then this thing becomes the meaningful thing to calculate becomes 0 u dagger or minus 0. So which is basically an evolution operator calculated on a contour which comes back to itself. So you start with some in state, you come back to the in state. And you turn. And so this you want to go to the path integral. One has to again go through the exercise of discretizing this, inserting coherent complete set of states, and taking the continuum limit carefully, and ending up with the action description, path integral description. And this is the Schwinger-Keldysh. This is known as the Schwinger-Keldysh technique. Okay, this was pointed out by Schwinger, and then Keldysh developed it further. Okay, so for the Gross-Neveu model, if the Hamiltonian is just now the time-dependent Hamiltonian is just G square over T 2n psi bar x I am suppressing. This is the let me write x also. X. Okay, this is the Hamiltonian, and now if you do the same thing, so normally the kinetic term comes from the inner product of coordinate states. Here you will see that there will be, so the way the one useful representation of Schwinger-Keldysh is you double the number of fields. So you denote the fields on the top contour by plus and the bottom contour by minus. And then if you do the discretization and carry out this process with this Hamiltonian, you will see that you will get action which will, before taking the continuum limit, you will get some terms with plus fields and some with minus fields. Mostly it will be uncorrelated, but because there is a joining condition here, there will be some term with which will have a psi plus and a psi minus. But now you do the Haber-Stratanovich again, and again, so the not to be misled, you do it again in this discrete. You do a discrete Haber-Stratanovich, and you do all this exercise, and you end up with S effective, which is this. Okay, so now you have two order parameters, sigma plus and sigma minus, and there you had two kinds of fermions, sigma plus, sigma minus, and again there it turns out very nicely that there is no coupling between plus and minus for the sigma fields, and you still have a minus sign factor of n here, so you can still do saddle point, and this is the effective action that you get. Okay, and then again you extremize, you get this. This is your dynamical saddle point equation. The difference now is earlier this entire thing was time independent, but now sigma cannot be time independent. Sigma has to be a function of time because G depends on time. So sigma must depend on time. Okay, and what appears in this right hand side is this trace of this operator. That basically this is like a free fermion propagated with a time dependent mass. So we need to calculate, what we need to calculate to solve for sigma is to calculate a free fermion propagator with a time dependent mass. Okay, and then hopefully we will be able to write down a better equation involving sigma and G, from where we can maybe do some approximation and figure out what is sigma as function of time. Okay, so in this case, this diagonal form, we are fortunate that we get this diagonal form. Otherwise, we have to really work with a matrix, but it's still not that non-trivial. Okay, so then this is the equation that we have to solve. Any questions?
So here I don't see how you would get thermalization even in the eigenstate sense, no? Because effectively it's free field theory, like.
Yeah, but still there will be. So it's why do you say free field theory? Sorry. There's a lot of interactions, right? If you expand the log, you get lots of interactions.
Yes, but
they're not.
But still, yeah, but still, I think the saddle point is exact.
Saddle point is exact.
In this sense, it's a free field theory because
there is non-trivial phase transition. This is a theory at very strong coupling.
Yeah. No, I'm just getting confused about this. That if you have the saddle point approximation to be exact in the large n limit, unless you're taking 1/n corrections, you don't see. So so people did the similar study with ON models, and in that case, so they were not doing a quench; they were simply evolving it using taking some initial state and then not vacuum, some non-trivial state, and they were evolving it in time, and they were seeing thermalization. And in that case, people had to add 1/n square or some higher order correction at simply the large n order. You couldn't see thermalization at all. So I'm a bit confused. I would be rather surprised if you could see some even eigenstate thermalization with simply a saddle point approximation.
Yeah, so I think the ON model in some maybe d = 3 is integrable. So also that depends on which dimension you are in. So at large,
They did it for d is equal to 4. This paper was
I see.
where it is not integrable, and
Okay, I don't know about that. But yeah, I'll just show you what I see, what I
okay.
see from the calculation, and then you can judge. So here, basically, I will try to calculate this trace right now. So trace is a function of some time-dependent quantity which you don't know. So this is basically a two-point function of some fermion, and this is the free fermion propagated. So you can think of, so this is a useful way to think about this, but this is not to uh, tell you that the theory is free. This is basically, I am finding a eigenfunction decomposition of this operator. So this is the so basically this is the eigenfunction equation, and basically this can be solved again by making some ansatz, but this is now a spinor, so there is uk and vk, and if I make this kind of a ansatz, this kind of a rewriting of uk and vk, then I get these two coupled equations. Till here everything is exact, and this is the this comes from demanding correct anti-commutator relationship. And now, given this constraint and the fact that at t equal to minus infinity, this is really an equilibrium problem, because I was taking this g to be constant. I want to start with some equilibrium boundary condition, ground state. This turns out to be a useful answer. So the one major one major step in this calculation is to come up with a good ansatz, and this ansatz works very nicely, and then you can plug in these ansatz in these equations. You get a differential equation for this omega k of t, which you can solve in derivative expansion, like the way we did it for. This is very reminiscent of the way the free boson problem was solved. And this is what you get something, and then you plug that into this saddle equation, and actually with a cutoff, because anyway this theory has dimensional transmutation, so the cutoff makes some physical sense. So with a cutoff you can do this integral, and you can solve for sigma. Okay, and you have to check for self-consistency that this is restricted.
But the cutoff should also be incorporated in G, right? Itself
Yeah. So you will reproduce the self-consistency check is that the cutoff will be there in G, and you should reproduce the equilibrium answer. If you turn off the coupling, you should reproduce. So this is the gap equation. This is the equation for sigma. Some equation which has to be numerically solved. In equilibrium, it reduces to what you expect. When you turn off sigma dot and sigma double dot, you get the equilibrium solution, and then you can solve this numerically with the boundary condition that it starts from so at minus infinity time, it starts with this value with g replaced with g initial. And this is what you get. So here is m of g. There is m of g final and m of g initial, which is what you expect in the equilibrium theory. And this is how you are tuning g. And you see that it starts from m of g I, and it goes to 0. Actually, it depends on the quench. So if you quench, if you do a small quench, if you do a tiny quench, if you do a very small quench, then it turns out that it will track the adiabatic ability. Okay, only there is some critical amplitude. If you cross that, then it seems to go to zero. And it really doesn't matter what kind of smooth quench you do. You can also do a quench where you suddenly turn on G smoothly still, turn on G, and then again you see it goes to zero. You can also design a scenario where G goes up. Then you will see that if the amplitude is small, it behaves like this, sigma. But if the amplitude is large enough, then it starts to rise and then it drops. So
Sorry, it was a bit too fast. So what is the criteria it will go to zero? I didn't quite get.
Yeah.
So you said there are instances where they don't go to zero. So but what is the criteria that it goes to zero?
Sorry, 1 second. This light there's a motion detector. It went off. Okay, so the criteria is that this amplitude of the quench has to exceed this G, G final minus G initial has to exceed some critical value.
And what is that critical value?
So we'll come to that.
Okay. So it's not the time, how fast or slow it is. It's about simply the amount of quench in some sense. The
amount of quench.
The change in.
Yeah. So exactly. Also, no, if you do it very fast, but for a small amplitude, then so we did not investigate the rate so much. We only I'll tell you what we study with the rate, but we actually also observed that so this is all for a fixed rate. That's why the slopes are same. But if I do it for a faster rate, if I do it for a very fast rate, then again there is symmetry restoration. Sigma again goes to zero.
But since you can understand it analytically, do you have analytical understanding now of this?
Yeah. So we have an understanding of a Kibble-Zurek kind of scaling of this phenomenon.
So, no, the criteria about when it goes to zero or when it doesn't go to zero.
So that in some way we have it, I'll tell you, and that connects to the finite temperature story. So just 2 more slides.
Okay.
But before I go to that, I just want to see what happens. So is there anything special with the time when it goes to zero? Or when it reaches some small value? Is there anything special with that? Is there, so what we saw is by doing this for different rates, this time seems to change. So we saw that if we do it very fast, then we don't have to wait so long. It comes to zero faster. And then we wanted to know that the time when it becomes small, does it have any scaling with how fast we do it? And so here the plot is, so here it is because there is a scale. It's useful to think the quench in terms of m of t. So m of t is again some function of time which is artificially designed from g of t, so that basically when g is static, this becomes the spontaneously broken mass of psi. So this is m of t, and the quench in g you can think of as quench in m. So these are different profiles of m, different colors or different rates, and for different rates we see that it goes to zero in different ways. Okay, and then we find out what time it goes to some small value. These times we extract. So this is just a sample plot. And then we plot these times as a function of these rates. And we find this plot. So the T0 as a function of this inverse or the mass scale associated with this change of rate follows, seems to follow on a power law. Okay, and then we want to ask if there is really some explanation for this. And it turns out that this can be understood analytically. So if we look at, the equation simplify, if we look at this limit. Okay, the cutoff over sigma. Sigma is anyway close to 0, going to 0. And in this limit, this equation simplifies to this equation. And then this equation we can invert again using derivative expansion. And we can write down this solution for sigma in terms of m and derivatives of m. And again, these derivative corrections become order 1 when adiabaticity breaks down. And that will give an emergent scale, much like the logic of Kibble-Zurek. And this one can solve, and one finds this function. And this function fits very nicely with what we find for T0. Okay, so there is a kind of a Kibble-Zurek phenomena happening with the time when symmetry is getting approximately restored. Okay, when approximately restored, because 0 is very difficult to say numerically what is 0. So we only pick some small value, and lines become parallel essentially, so we get the same scale. So there is this kind of a Kibble-Zurek kind of phenomena so for a small delta, for the regime of Kibble-Zurek, this square root scaling is the important part. This is some Lambert function, and this is what the data also shows. Any questions?
But you said that you would be able to also say something about when does it not go to 0?
Now I will show. Yeah. Actually, one second. Where is it? It is not. Okay, it is. So I have it somewhere. One second. So yeah, I thought I made a slide, but I'll show from the paper if that is all right.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, so if one studies the theory at finite temperature, then the gap equation modifies to this equation. So one has a earlier, remember, so this is the analog of the equation sigma is basically m over g square is trace 1 over plus m. So this is the analog of this equation is now this. It depends on temperature, and this there is this thermal mass which appears. This equation, this function f is only known as a series. So this can again be only numerically solved. But one can get a critical temperature where symmetry restoration happens from this equation. And that critical temperature is given by this value. This is the value in equilibrium. So what we can naively do is we can define in the quench context, there will be, so m becomes a function of time, so there will be some critical beta which will be a function of time. So in the zero temperature quench scenario. Okay. So now what we read out is this beta of t from a modification of the same equation. For m of t, we put in sigma of t. So this is by assuming that the system is thermalizing, and we are reading out what is the effective temperature. And we will see that this is consistent with the fact that there is a critical temperature in the equilibrium theory. So what we do is, we do this replacement in this equation where this sigma plays the role of m beta, and m0 is just the driven mass. And then we solve this equation. So we have already solved for sigma as function of t. We solve this equation for beta of t. So we find beta as function of t. Okay, and then we plot beta as function of t with respect to t. And this red line, which is actually not straight, if you see, zoom in, this is the profile of the critical beta as a function of temperature. Okay, which is basically given, which is a generalization of this critical beta at equilibrium generalized to where I make this mass time dependent. So this is the critical beta. And this is the beta of t which we extract from our numerical solution sigma of t. And we see there's those quenches where the rate is such that, which you were asking, that the rate is fast enough, or in this case, I think the amplitude, the GF minus GI is big enough so that symmetry is restored. So these orange and these blue dots. For these cases, it actually crosses this critical line, and symmetry gets restored. So it crosses the critical beta, so it effectively sees this high temperature, and symmetry gets restored. For these other lines where this green and blue are for very small, tiny GF minus GI, for which symmetry does not get restored. So in this way, we identify we relate to some critical phenomena. Yeah, unfortunately, means here it is still means even in equilibrium, this is a numerical thing for this model.
But you are saying that so the final beta is what determines whether you are or we are able to.
Yeah. So it is important that the beta is beta stable for these solutions, because the solution also ceases to fluctuate. Sigma ceases to fluctuate. If you remember how sigma was as function of time. So these betas also become asymptotically, they reach some constant value. But the time, again, this time where it crosses the critical point is again the same time, that t0, where sigma also reaches 0. So where this beta of t crosses beta critical of t, both are time dependent functions, where these two cross, this time is same as the time where sigma of t becomes 0.
Yeah, it's very nice that you see this indeed. But okay, so there has been a lot of discussion in the non-equilibrium physics literature about how to define an effective temperature. So you have one way to define it, right? By looking at the effective gap. I don't think that has been done before. It looks very novel, and indeed it fits in with the symmetry restoration thing, which is quite nice. But what I'm saying that it may not be, it does not imply thermalization on its own, or even eigenstate thermalization, because
I agree.
One has to see other observables too.
Actually, I have some comments about that at the end. That if we look at 1/n corrections, then we can say something about the thermalization problem.
No. Even in the large n limit, you could compute like I think you can also compute some other observables like other operators or something, and see if they also attain thermal expectation values, like with the same temperature that you're getting from the gap.
Absolutely.
Because here you're looking at only one operator, and if one should look at least one more operator or 2-point functions or whatever. 2-point functions often are much easier to compute sometimes.
Yeah. And also one other thing is that there are also some, but means one drawback still is that these are still numerical. Means because the dynamics of sigma is still complicated. Only in very special regimes it becomes simple. So one such regime, and this I'll come to now. So one such regime is where what you are suggesting, maybe one may look at that, is this regime where I define field Y in a scaling regime where I take lambda to infinity and keep sigma fixed. So in this regime, those equations simplify a lot, and that equation becomes y double dot minus 2 lambda square minus e power minus 2y equal to 0. And if you again, actually I should have done one redefinition. Define sigma as minus 2y, or actually phi as minus 2y. So new field phi. So basically sigma is lambda e power phi by 2. Actually take this to be the definition of phi. Then this equation, the equation for sigma, becomes the equation that follows from Liouville quantum mechanics, where the Liouville quantum field is phi. So then this basically this action, it follows from phi dot square over 8. So these numbers are also tuned. So these simple factors of 2 make up those numbers, e power 2 phi. And this is Liouville quantum mechanics. And some things are known about this, and this gives some kind of a. So this is first of all maybe little surprising that this effectively in this kind of scaling regime, this kind of this is also a 2D theory. This Liouville quantum mechanics appears, and but this gives kind of an argument that why symmetry gets restored, because this has been studied in the Hamiltonian formulation. One can calculate the wave function, which will be now a functional of sigma, and this wave function, the normalizable wave function. So if you look at Ginsburg and Moore, you will see that the spectrum of this theory, there is indexed by some continuous variable k, and the wave function, which is basically this this product. This is the normalizable wave function, is given by modified Bessel function square root 2 sigma. And if you look at mod psi square, you will see that indeed it has a maxima at sigma equal to 0. At sigma equal to 0, as sigma goes to 0. So it gives some kind of a, so maxima at k going to 0. So for low energies, so k is like the energy, a is the eigenvalue of this, of basically h psi is k psi. And if you look at low energy subspace, and if you look at the probability distribution, you will see that it peaks at sigma going to 0. So this is one very, this is not just observation. There may be some reason behind this, and it will be interesting to explore this further. But it gives a kind of a heuristic argument why this system, which one can think of, map it to this Liouville theory, prefers sigma 0 configurations. Okay, so this is not a foolproof. Maybe one can make this more rigorous. So then one other point which may relate to this point is that indeed the 2D Gross-Neveu model, there is a string theory construction of this, and it involves intersecting D4, D6 branes. And basically at the intersection of this D4, D6, you have the 2D Gross-Neveu model. And the separation of D6 branes is related to 1 over G, which was the coupling in the Gross-Neveu model. And now having the quench is just moving around these branes. Will be moving around these branes. And then one can again look at these expectation values of sigma, maybe other coordinators, and see what happens dynamically. And maybe if so, one telltale sign of this Liouville like description appearing is if this geometry has any near radius to behavior emerging dynamically. So that is some that will make some contact with this Liouville story, which is very poorly understood. So this is what I had to say, and also this description makes it possible to calculate other correlators of sigma. So in particular, one prediction of this Liouville description is if I measure sigma t, sigma 0, it should decay as t power minus 3 by 2. So this, we have not checked it, but maybe one can check it. Okay, but because the theory itself, the action itself from which everything, all the dynamics is dictated, that reduces to the Liouville action in this appropriate scaling regime, one will expect this to be true. Okay, and so this is what I had to say about this part. And then you can ask about.
But this has nothing to. Sorry, but this has nothing to do with eigenstrip thermalization. It is simply you're looking at looking at sort of a pure, kind of.
This has not
behavior here.
Yeah, I think means what will be more means more. So this is again calculated in this. So one can think of this calculation as sigma in this quench state.
Yeah, basically, I don't see the dynamical temperature in this sort of argument that you talked about earlier. So how do you compute the gap? What is the relationship? So how does the gap appear here, m of t, that you described before? In this context, one needs to understand, no?
Yeah, that definitely one needs to understand more. Basically, if I want to equate this to some thermal expectation value, so this is the early time decay. So we know that
exactly this should be the early time behavior only.
We know it has to decay with time, and then this is the early time decay. And then what the question you are asking is about the asymptotic value, the late time asymptotic value. Understanding that will means basically what is the scale which determines that asymptotic value is the question.
Yes.
That probably that can also be answered by looking maybe in this scaling regime, looking at the Liouville. I have not yet seen this in detail, but maybe if we look into the Liouville theory a little more, maybe one can see that. It kind of behaves like SYK in one reduced dimension. This model, it has quadratic interaction. There is no disorder. You are in strong coupling. You are in this regime. And by the way, all the saddle point approximation. So one needs to see when the saddle point approximation breaks down, and that is when if I expand near the saddle and look at delta sigma correlator, this will be 1 by n suppressed, but times something. If this times something diverges, then the saddle point approximation will break down. And
there is some time where of order n where it can, or
there will be some very far away it will break down. But maybe before that itself we will have some thermal description. That is the hope.
Yeah. Okay.
Some thermal description. Because also numerically is not accessible.
Yeah. That also happens for black holes because the black hole formation, the thermalization time scale is much shorter than the black hole evaporation time scale. If you're in this large n limit. And
right, exactly. So this is, it will be dictated by basically this, but the criteria of this diverging can be found out. That is when sigma becomes of order G. So that that one can actually see that this and then one needs to, because if one does the calculation, one will actually find this becomes basically what one needs to do. So there is a nice paper by Kufu and others where they calculate for the ON model saddle fluctuations, and then this formalism is well maybe written down. Say so. If you look at the functional integral, and this is the last thing. So then just this thing. So if you calculate this, this will be d2x, d2y, delta sigma plus minus x. Actually, sigma vector is basically sigma plus sigma minus transpose. And then there is this matrix, which is minus I del slash plus sigma plus squares plus 1 by g square. It's diagonal. So, but with this is the saddle value, sigma minus saddle plus 1 by g square whole square delta sigma plus minus. And if you calculate now the sigma, using this you can calculate the sigma delta sigma correlator in terms of, you can write it down in terms of the saddle point value, and you can ask again when it blows up what happens, and from there you will get this criteria. Okay, so this is this is what I had to say, and let me show some. Maybe I already talked about these open questions, but another interesting thing to understand will be to understand if there is a fast scaling that we have not looked at. If the delta t inverse is greater than the mass scale of set by g initial, that we have not seen. So if we can do that, we cannot do all these derivative expansions anymore. So, and then other thing is if they means what happens to the, so this I absolutely did not talk about, but there can be an interesting discussion with non-perturbative objects out of equilibrium.
I just you are doing in real time, right? I mean, what do you mean by instantons here?
Yeah. So yes. So.
But okay, I understand that you can have different this two vacua, and then you could have these transitions. And
so yeah. So problem one will set up is the Euclidean problem. One can again think of the Euclidean problem, but in the analytically continued version, you still have some dependence of the value.
You can have,
and then you can still calculate tunnel limitations.
Right. Yes, indeed.
So how those things are contributing with the symmetry?
So the non-perturbative things, non-perturbative objects like that.
Non-perturbative objects. Large N is sort of non-perturbative, but
in the large N limit, typically the instantons are suppressed.
Yes. So maybe
you have to see in.
Yeah, but actually Shankar had found out the exact instantons for the Gross nebulae. R. Shankar and Witten. So there, I think maybe one can suitably make those things time dependent. That's my hope to find.
I see.
Instanton solution. And these are
okay. So maybe we should conclude now.
Yeah. These are some references, and thanks for your attention.
Okay. Diptarkar, thanks for this really very interesting talk, and thanks for so much time to explain everything.
Thanks for.
So let's take a few questions.
Please.
So questions from the audience. I will not ask any further question because it's already asked too many.
Thank you for asking so many questions.
Okay, doesn't seem like there are further questions. So thanks, Diptarko, again. Really, we enjoyed the talk, and hope to see you in Chennai at some point when things get better.
So you should visit here.
Yeah, I also haven't visited Kanpur for a very long time. Okay. All right, good. So have a nice evening and rest of the week for all of you, and see you back for the next talk then.
Thanks. Okay, I leave.
Bye.
Bye.